In the heart of a powerful Igbo kingdom called Obieze, ruled a wise and feared king named Nnamdi. He was known across 7 rivers and 12 hills, not only for his conquest but for the deep love he had for his wife, Queen Amaka. Their union was celebrated with dances, wine, and the slaughtering of 21 fat rams. For 15 years, Queen Amaka gave him 4 beautiful daughters, but no son. Nnamdi was a man tormented by tradition. The elders whispered behind kola nuts and palm wine. How can a kingdom without a male heir survive? What happens when the king dies? Who will continue the lion's lineage? Though he loved Amaka, the pressure became unbearable. One night, under the full moon, he called for the council of elders. I will take a second wife, he said coldly, his voice void of the warmth that once belonged to Amaka's embrace. The council nodded in agreement. It was tradition. It was law. Enter Ugochi, a woman of deadly beauty. Her waist moved like a serpent when she walked, and her eyes were pools of secrets. No one knew where she came from, but her voice was sweet as fresh honey. The market women said she was a child of the river, born under the cursed star of Afiola. But the king didn't listen. All he saw was a promise of a male heir. Queen Amaka died inside the day Ugochi entered the palace. But she smiled. Oh, she smiled like a carved mask, hiding her pain behind royal beads. 9 months passed. And then, lightning cracked the sky. Queen Amaka screamed through the night and gave birth to a son, Chokudi, a healthy boy with a birthmark shaped like an eagle's feather. The palace rejoiced. But before the drums could rest, Ugochi went into labor the same day and delivered a baby girl, Adaure, as pale as the moonlight, with cold fingers and eyes that didn't blink. The moment the midwife cut Adaure's cord, the wind howled through the palace corridors. A mirror shattered. A dog barked and dropped dead. The firewood cracked on its own. And in the darkest room of the palace, Queen Amaka's shadow moved, while she was asleep. The naming ceremony was grand. The king danced with pride as he raised Chokudi high in the air. He whispered, "My heir, my future, the lion's blood." But Ugochi's eyes didn't blink. She looked at her baby girl and whispered things in a tongue no one understood. That night, the palace guard Obina heard laughter in the corridors, laughter of a child, but both babies were asleep. He followed the sound and found nothing. Only that the portrait of the late king's father had blood dripping from its eyes. Within weeks, the palace turned cold. Queen Amaka began to hear voices from her walls, voices of her dead mother, telling her to leave before it's too late. Little Chokudi cried at odd hours, screaming like he saw things no one else could. Adaure didn't cry. She smiled all the time, even in the dark. Even when alone. Even when there was no sun to smile at. One afternoon, the royal cook entered the nursery and found Adaure levitating, floating inches above her cot, giggling as rats gathered below her feet. The cook screamed and ran, but her tongue fell out of her mouth before she reached the gate. She died with her eyes wide open and pointing at the palace roof. The king said it was a stroke. Queen Amaka said nothing, but that night, she took her baby and fled to the shrine of Dibia Ojimba, the oldest priest in the east. When Ojimba saw the child, he screamed. This child, this boy, carries the mark of the true heir. But the girl is not of this world. She carries the curse of Abali, the demon goddess of silence. Amaka gasped. What must I do? Ojimba wept. It is too late. When a king marries a child of Abali, blood will spill, and the crown will rot. Your son must be protected. Or he will die before his 7th name day. Nnamdi refused to believe Dibia Ojimba's warnings. Old fool, he thundered. No girl child will bring ruin to my house. But while he roared like a lion, a storm was already rising inside the heart of his palace. At just 3 months, Adaure began to speak. Not words. Not babbles. But names of dead kings, names long buried beneath the palace grounds. And each time she spoke, the ground trembled, and strange footprints appeared on the walls. One moonless night, Amaka's maidservant, Nkiru, disappeared. Her room was found torn apart, no blood, no signs of struggle, just her wrapper folded neatly on her bed. That same night, Adaure was found giggling, holding one of Nkiru's earrings. Ugochi only smiled. She probably ran away, she said, brushing Adaure's hair with a comb made of bone. But Amaka knew. Oh, she knew. And so she returned to Dibia Ojimba with her son, now barely 5 months old. The Dibia looked pale, even thinner than before. She is no longer a child. That thing in the palace is feeding. Feeding? Amaka asked. On souls. On spirits. Every time someone vanishes, it becomes stronger. And when it becomes strong enough, your son will be the last piece she needs. Amaka broke down in tears. Why my son? She came to this world for the crown, Ojimba said, trembling. The throne was meant for Chukwudi, but the spirit of Abali hates destiny. She wants to wear the crown. And only when Chukwudi is gone, can she truly become queen. At 1 year old, Adaure no longer blinked. No one noticed at first. But the palace maids began whispering, she doesn't eat. She doesn't sleep. She stares at the moon and smiles. Then one morning, Nnamdi's favorite horse was found torn apart. Not eaten, just shredded. On its back, carved in blood, was a single word, mine. The king began to grow weak. His eyes dulled, his skin cracked, and his voice quivered. He saw his ancestors in his dreams, warning him, screaming at him. But he ignored them all. He turned on Amaka instead. You poisoned the palace with jealousy, he accused her. You brought that Dibia to curse Ugochi and my daughter. Amaka was locked in her chambers. Chukwudi was seized by the palace guards and kept in the inner royal hut, watched day and night. But that night, all 10 guards died in their sleep. No wounds. No signs of struggle. Just their mouths stuffed with ash. Chukwudi, however, was untouched. Sleeping peacefully, but on his tiny chest, someone had drawn a black serpent in charcoal. Nnamdi, now a shadow of himself, decided to take action. He summoned 7 native doctors from across the lands. They arrived with charms, chants, and pots of burning herbs. They walked into the nursery where Adaure sat in silence, surrounded by her toys made of sticks and bones. They chanted. They sang. They called on the gods. And then they screamed. One by one, their bodies caught fire from the inside. Their blood boiled, pouring from their eyes, ears, and mouths. They dropped like flies. Only one managed to crawl to the palace gate before a snake emerged from his throat and hissed his final breath. Ugochi stood in the nursery doorway. Now you see, she whispered. My daughter is no one's child. She is the beginning and the end. The king, struck with fear, ran to the sacred shrine of Teik, begging the gods to forgive him. But the gods did not listen. The sky turned red. The trees around the shrine bled sap. And the river near the palace dried up, leaving only bones. Chukwudi, now 2 years old, began speaking in tongues. At night, he would cry, not from hunger, but from visions. She's coming, he would whisper. She walks in my dreams. Amaka knew she had no time. She carried her son and ran again to Dibia Ojimba, but his shrine was burned to the ground. In the ashes, a single note remained, written in a language not of this earth. Amaka could not read it, but Chukwudi could. She says, run. But there was nowhere left to run. That same night, thunder cracked the sky, and a river of blood flowed through the palace halls. The royal guards tried to flee but found themselves running in circles. Adaure stood in the center court, barefoot, her eyes glowing white, her mouth whispering names of the dead. Father, she said sweetly. Come. Nnamdi, now trembling like a child, staggered toward her. Please, he begged. What do you want? Adaure reached out and touched his chest. Your breath, she whispered. And he collapsed, lifeless.